Well, hello. Good morning, everyone. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to McDuff Lives, and special welcome to our guest this morning, Mr. Daniel Burke. How are you, Daniel?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for having me on, John.
Well, I felt it was something I really needed to do when I saw the post that you put up about last Thursday or so, in which you indicated that someone had posted something about the Schiller Institute conference coming up on October 15th. And as a result of this hit list, this Ukrainian blacklist thing, um, actually said alert grenade throwers for this event. I found that to be way over the top, chilling, and in view of the actual assassinations and assassination attempts of people on the hit list, starting, of course, with Alexandra Dugina, but a number of other incidents that are connected to this hit list. Um, I feel it's my duty as someone, as a citizen, and as someone who has a platform to offer my platform to you to respond to this intimidation and to condemn it in the strongest possible terms. So that's why I've invited you, Daniel, as one of the people on this notorious list to respond. And so you have the floor. What would you like to say in response to this horrific notice?
Well, I thank you very much for that. One point of clarification, I'm not personally on the list, but of course we have perhaps 6 or 7 members of the Schiller Institute who have been placed on the Ukrainian Center for Countering Disinformation list, which is financed with money from the U.S. government and directed with cooperation of the U.S. State Department. Um, and this list has been used as effectively the determining the advice that is given that is then picked up, the identification of the people who should then be picked up and placed on the infamous Mirotvorets list, which is absolutely a list intended to identify targets for assassination and for death. And that has been uh, extremely terrifying situation, absolutely. However, I would say that now, if we want to change the strategic course, which is hurtling towards thermonuclear war between NATO and Russia, and therefore general thermonuclear war, then it's our responsibility as American citizens to uh, stand up, go to the Congress, indicate this kind of thing is happening. The specific thing you're referring to is that, you know, it's not the first time that I've had a death threat on Twitter. There was a whole account that was created called that used my face with an inverted color scheme that specified execute Larouches and identified me as a specific target for violence. This is a continuation of that. It is an effort to intimidate people who would call for peace and collaboration and a possible way out of this vortex that we're in that is taking us towards this nuclear crisis caused by people like Joe Biden and his associates. So,
Daniel, let me interrupt you for a second because we
please.
just had an internet glitch which obscured the last half of your statement there. So perhaps if you'd repeat it, I would be interesting if it happens again, if somebody might be actually dirtboxing our conversation.
So, to making sure I try not to miss anything that I said. The point is that there has been threats of violence, assassination on Twitter in particular. People who created accounts that said things like "execute Larouches." This latest one that John is referring to is a heinous effort to try to create intimidation for a conference coming up in October 15th in Manhattan that is entirely about creating a new paradigm of peace and shutting down this kind of fascism that we're facing with these death lists. And I'll tell you, by way of mobilizing people, that Diane Sayre, the Larouche Party candidate for U.S. Senate in New York, who is opposing Chuck Schumer, she has just released a major statement asking if the media blackout of Diane and her campaign is not part of a prelude to nuclear war, because she is on this Center for Countering Disinformation list by the Ukrainian government, which was announced at a roundtable on July 14 that included representatives essentially from the US State Department. This list, which is financed by, the operations of the Ukrainian government to produce this list is financed by the US government to the tune of, tens and tens of billions of dollars. And she is organizing a rally in Manhattan next Thursday, October 6th, in front of the Third Avenue offices of Senator Chuck Schumer to demand of him, and we're asking everyone to call into his office, why are you supporting the listing of your political opponent? Why are you taking legislative actions to support the listing of your political opponent as an information terrorist who should be treated as a war criminal, according to the Ukrainian official Shapovalov, who announced this list? And by the way, that means execution. That's the general idea of what should happen to a war criminal, according to the way that this Ukrainian official was talking about it. So it's time to stand up. It's time to get to the Congress and say, you must end the U.S. congressional support, the U.S. government support for this type of blacklist, which threatens every single person on it with death.
I was speaking to our friend Harley Schlanger last week, and the subject of hybrid warfare came up. And in trying to understand why something called an information terrorist is now a category. I think we could look into the hybrid warfare theories that come out of Rumsfeld and have now there with Petraeus and you name it. The idea of hybrid warfare being, hey, it's not just a battlefield, it's also a battlefield of public opinion. It's a battlefield of media. It's a battlefield of control of information and thereby influencing people's minds to support your side. And I wonder, is it your opinion that this term information terrorist comes out of the doctrine of hybrid warfare? And are we in fact involved in a information war? And I emphasize the word war because of the fatal consequences of being on the wrong side in a war. Is this really coming out of that hybrid warfare concept, do you think?
That's a very good question, and I couldn't say for sure. We've done an investigative report on this that we released at a September 7th press conference, which people could listen to, where we had a number of people participating. Then we had a follow-up to that with our international conference on the 10th and 11th, which included people like Eva Bartlett, the journalist, the Canadian journalist who's been reporting from the Donbass. She's on the list. So we have gone into it. We have gone into where, how this thing is developed presently, but I think your hypothesis is a very strong one. I mean, my approach to it is the following. I look at it and I say, first of all, we can make this backfire. That's been our approach at the Schiller Institute the whole time, which is to say, the Ukrainian government identified that 30 out of the 72 first people who were placed on that list, who are, those people were participants in the Schiller Institute international online conferences. We had all types of people, trying to tell us, oh, these are not that important. Oh, your voice is not that crucial. Shows like yours are not that, oh, this is not that important in the world, in the grand scheme of things. And it's proven that that's not true. It's absolutely demonstrated that every voice that we can raise, every conversation that we can have about this and educate people across the country about it, is dangerous to the people who would like to create war. I mean, to put it in strategic context again, I'm sure your listeners are very much well briefed on this, but it was the head of the Ukrainian armed forces who only maybe 2 weeks ago put out a letter saying we need to consider a preemptive nuclear strike on Russia. That's the only way we're really going to win this war, is a preemptive nuclear strike on Russia. And that was done the day before the major meeting at Ramstein Air Base that included Lloyd Austin, the U.S. Secretary of Defense. So there was a huge NATO effort to put forward the idea of preemptive nuclear war, and then they all got excited when Putin said, "Well, we would have to respond in kind," essentially. That is the strategic context for this, and we have to consider that they're freaked out about the possibility that peace would catch on, that special significant proposals for how to address this fundamental crisis would actually be discussed at high levels among citizens, among diplomats, among people of with a public voice, retired intelligence professionals, retired public officials, who are the people that speak at Schiller Institute conferences. And therefore, we should wear this badge proudly, at the same time that we're honest about how dangerous the situation is and the actual threat that's being made. But we should wear this badge proudly and invite everyone that we know to take steps forward on the basis of the clarity that peace is an option, and they would do anything possible to prevent that from being discussed. But we can continue to do that. We can continue to demand a solution concept be discussed.
I've been studying Larouche material for about 3 years now, since I became reoriented towards everything as a result of my experiences supporting President Obama through his first election. But then after we saw what he was doing, I started getting disillusioned and looking for other solutions. Well, I've never seen anything from Larouche or Schiller or any of your really excellent writers, and that was for anything but peace. This is an organization that wants to have peace through dialogue, as I understand it, and peace through just open conversation. Is that why they think you're so threatened? They're so threatened by you? Is that they're afraid of just having an open conversation about the real issues?
If I may, I point to the comments of Antonov, the ambassador of the Russian Federation to the United States, who participated in the Schiller Institute conference, I believe, of April of this year, in which he stated clearly that without the Schiller Institute, it would be difficult to create the kind of understanding about the compromises that need to be made between nations to work together in peace. He stated that before the Ukrainian government identified the importance of the Schiller Institute, the Russian Federation did. And the fact is that if you look around, for one, people are terrified, and therefore there are anemic efforts only to actually promote peace and development. And secondly, the requirement of having an international movement, of having serious proposals for peace, as for example, the new Bretton Woods proposal that Helga Larouche has been committed to for decades and has reiterated in a more developed fashion for the present strategic period. Because of the fact that we have proposals that were based on the economic science of Mr. Larouche, because of the fact that we have a mission orientation, we have a movement all around the world which is growing, and that's really the excitement about the October 15 conference. Therefore, we have an ability to host these fora, and everyone is invited who is willing in the spirit of goodwill, to actually try to figure out how to solve these problems. So I do think that is what makes us most worrisome to the people who are committed to destruction, because who can possibly who can possibly go along with this? Look at what's going on in Europe. I mean, it's insane. The idea that we're gonna freeze in the winter in order to execute this unwinnable war. Like who would go along with this other than out of fear of reprisal, or out of confusion because of the vast brainwashing propaganda, or the fact that people are forced into silence. And so everyone who can say something should.
The Larouche name is kind of radioactive in a way. It's been made radioactive intentionally over decades, and going back to Larouche's confrontations with Robert Swan Mueller III, and his incarceration, which is just a horrific abuse of the law to shut up somebody whose only crime is free speech. And I think that goes for the entire organization in a way. Yet, you folks are very, very dedicated to 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 reviving LaRouche's good name, is a good way to put it, because of, just as now, it was back then, it was intimidation. It was to create a sense of terror at just, I don't want to be associated with people that are getting locked up, or with people that are on a blacklist, or people and so you guys have displayed a tremendous amount of courage and loyalty. And I wonder if you'd just take a moment to introduce your LaRouche Schiller movement to people that are not familiar with it at
Sure.
all, because I've spent the last 3 years trying to catch up with what you're doing. And I must say, it's a far cry from the impression I had 30 years ago, when you'd hear something about, LaRouche and some activity that seemed kind of fringe and not really helpful. So the press has been very cruel to Lyndon LaRouche and Helga and your whole movement. Nevertheless, you guys persist, and you have a great deal of courage. So tell folks again a little bit about Lyndon LaRouche, and why you all are so loyal to him and his ideas.
Well, Mr. LaRouche, it's important to. I mean, he died in now 3 years ago, in 2019, in February of 2019, after really, I mean, devoting his entire life to pursuing and then following through on certain discoveries in economic science that he made in the late 1940s and early 1950s. And what he did was he overthrew the uh, information theories, the theory of information science, or information society, information theory of John von Neumann and Norbert Wiener. He overthrew the idea that uh, economic progress, economic development, that the human mind can be reduced to data, to cold hard data, to some sort of statistical analysis that's going to be able to forecast how things will develop on the basis of how things presently exist in the world strategic system, in the world economic system, in human culture. LaRouche said, no, human beings are born in the living image of God. They have something inside of them that is innate, which is an ability known as human creativity, which is only available to the human species. It's not available to any other species, to our knowledge. And this is an ability to make discoveries of the unseen universal principles that govern reality, that govern the universe. And that when mankind, as in the case of an individual human being, makes a discovery of principle that has never been made before, overthrows everything that had been understood before in that field of science, culture, whatever it may be, makes a true revolutionary breakthrough, that this then is the source of progress for the human species. It's the source of the increase of wealth of mankind, the increase of the powers of labor, the ability of a human being, of human society, to do more and more work with through the use of machinery, technology, science, to accomplish greater and greater good for humanity in this universe, and that therefore there are certain policy orientations like Malthusianism, most importantly, and of that of British free trade as expressed in the work of Adam Smith, those policy orientations that say man is a beast, that the increase of the human population is a danger to everything. It's going to cause an ecological crisis. It's going to cause a population bomb effect that will lead to a breakdown of society. The people who claim that are responsible for the position that we're in today. The fact that you have leading people from Henry Kissinger, Zbigniew Brzezinski in terms of U.S. policy formation, that you have the impact of back at, of course, the Trilateral Commission of the Rockefellers, and the British monarchy, the Al Gore, anyone in the position of power in the West, those people, and not only the West, who have committed to this Malthusian ideology. Larouche said in early 1970s, this was going to lead to fascism, World War III, famine, pandemics, and collapse. And as an antidote to that, he began an international movement, which began as a student movement in the late 1960s and early 1970s, in which he went to people who were protesting the Vietnam War, for example, many people like that, and he said, you must join me. Let's create a mission to develop the third world. And if we employ the principles of thermonuclear fusion, for example, and if we shut down these IMF policies that are based on austerity and choking nations to death with debt, but instead we initiate a new international monetary system, a new international economic system based on extending credit to huge infrastructure projects, science and technology that will lift people out of poverty all over the world, then we will have done something worth doing. Then we will have had some real fun with our lives and contributed to the people who come after. And that has been the underlying commitment, the main devotion of the International Larouche movement throughout the period. In the 1970s, he made tremendous breakthroughs in this regard with the non-aligned movement, as in 1975 when he proposed a new international development bank, with the leader of India, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, with the president of Mexico in the early 1980s, Lopez Portillo, and with many other people. And what happened in those developing nations primarily is that most of the people that Larouche was working with and making all of these grand proposals for economic development were assassinated or couped, as in the case of Ali Bhutto, as in the case of Indira Gandhi. Both were killed, as in the case of Lopez Portillo was not able to continue politically in what he was doing. So many other cases. And then, of course, in the 1980s, when Larouche miraculously got Reagan to begin to take a track that would lead in the direction of Larouche's policies, Larouche was tarred as a cultist, an anti-Semite, a fascist, a communist, everything in between, everything you could say, by people like James Jesus Angleton of the CIA and John Train, who recently passed away, the Wall Street financier and basically collaborator of the CIA's Congress for Cultural Freedom. These people did everything possible to make people afraid to associate with Larouche, and then, as you indicated, Larouche was imprisoned after a completely unjust trial in which he and a number of his associates were turned into political prisoners, which, of course, the comment of his appeals attorney, former Attorney General
Ramsey.
Thank you, Ramsey Clark, excuse me. He made clear his view that this was one of the greatest injustices ever done by law enforcement, by the DOJ, an effort to destroy a political movement. And yet, Helga Larouche in particular really, Helga Larouche's wife, now widow, she really took up the fight while Lyndon was in prison. We continued, we fought it out over the past 30 years, and it was in the early 90s when LaRouche was still in prison that the World Land Bridge became a conception, a proposal for the world, which we fought for all over the world. And then in 2013, Xi Jinping announced the Belt and Road Initiative, which is very much coherent with the economic science and the proposals of LaRouche. And we entered into a completely new era, I think. And today, we're in that era where the momentum in the world has shifted entirely to Eurasia. And the problem is that people in the West continue to listen to Malthus instead of to LaRouche. But we are undaunted because of the view that either we get the change or we get thermonuclear war. And I don't see an in between. And so that's my shorthand version of what we are as a movement, and what we're trying to build is to a success for that mission of the total economic development of humanity.
Well, thank you for that. And tell us a little bit now, if you will, about the sister organization, or if you will, the Schiller Institute, and Helga's decision to create that in Germany. And what is the European side of the LaRouche movement?
Oh, well, the Schiller Institute, I guess it's founded in 84. And I would really recommend that people take a look on the Schiller Institute website, schillerinstitute.com. If you go to the About page, then you will find you will find something called the Declaration of the Inalienable Rights of Man. Ooh, there we go. Yeah. Yeah, right up there, About. And then if you go to About, yeah, there we go. Our activity, oh no, our founding principle, I think it's there. So there we go. November 24, 1984, we had 1,500 people from over 50 countries. This is way before the internet, so everyone was there in person. And you can see when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for the peoples in the world to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with one another. I won't read the whole thing, but obviously this is the Declaration of Independence rewritten for all of mankind. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And the way that this goes, with some, of course, some changes to the Declaration of Independence, is designed to present a mission, which is to say that the profound principles of the U.S. Revolution, the profound concepts of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are indeed universal, and that all nations have the right to this outlook, to this approach to their own population. All people have the right to this, and that therefore we need to reorganize the world economic architecture, because, and it specifies in this document, the role of the IMF and other international financial institutions has been to choke development. It has been to prevent the progress of food self-sufficiency in nations like Haiti. It's been to, if you look at the Biden administration activity, Nazi-type action to seize the foreign exchange reserves of Afghanistan. It's resulted in 22 million people being driven towards famine. That's just in the past year, a vicious use of the financial system to kill people with the stroke of a pen. This is the norm. It's reached an absolutely horrific standpoint at this point. It continues to get worse at this point, but it is a part of a decades-long policy orientation which the Schiller Institute was organized in order to shift, in order to change, in order to oppose. And so therefore we have people across Europe. We have people in Ibero-America. We have people in North America who are collaborating on this, among other allies and friends and supporters across the world. For example, Princey Mthombeni, the South African leader of Africa for Nuclear, which is an advocacy group. She's fighting to end energy poverty in Africa, effectively, allow Africa to develop the energy resources that it has and that it requires to lift people out of poverty, African nations to do that. She will be speaking at our upcoming conference. And she's someone who's, working with us to follow through on the goals stated in that document.
Give us her name again and spell it for me because it's a little difficult.
Sure. Her first name is, she goes by Princey, Princy. Her last name is Mthombeni, which is MthomBeni. And you can find her on Twitter. You can see her YouTube channel, Africa for Nuclear, and you can hear what she has to say when she speaks at our conference.
Excellent work. In Africa, we have the prime example, I think, of where a difference of opinion might make a difference. When we look at the West's policy towards Africa, I mean, it's horrific. We can start wherever you want. It's always horrific, whether it's the slave trading from the 1600s or even earlier than that, to the prince, to King Leopold of Belgium and his horrific devastation of the Congo, and the ongoing rape of all the resources there, while at the same time keeping Africa and African countries and peoples from having their own system of development, which is the assassination of Patrice Lumumba, while President Kennedy was in preparing for his inauguration. The CIA kills this man who would have been working with Kennedy to actually develop his country and develop Africa. They didn't even tell Kennedy until after Kennedy had completed his inaugural speech, in which he praised the idea of former colonial powers becoming self-sufficient and the idea of the United States being a helping hand, as opposed to what's happened. And now, after the assassination of President Kennedy, all of those good intentions have been swept under the rug, swept by the by. But Africa, what an incredible amount of potential there still is there for human development in a positive way. And I know that the Schiller Institute has concentrated a lot of work on that specific topic. Tell us a little bit about that as far as you can do for us this morning.
Well, people may not realize this, but I believe that the average age of people on the African continent is about 18. It's incredible. There is an enormous youth population in Africa. And if we want them, and by we I mean humanity, if we as human beings want to see those people be able to develop their creative powers to the full potential, if we want to see people able to exercise their right to be human beings made in the living image of God, then it is incumbent upon us to ensure that we create a new international economic order that would be able to extend credit, a system in which credit could be extended to national banks in each country, that for mega projects that would increase the energy flux density, increase the physical platform of the economy within these nations. And so among the projects that we have proposed, we have been working together on discussing the development of the highway system, which is completely underdeveloped. We need a transcontinental rail system, east-west and now north-south for the continent. Imagine we got a transcontinental rail in the 1860s, and there's not transcontinental rail, not genuine transcontinental rail, not functioning transcontinental rail in Africa in 2022. China is right now building high-speed trains in various African countries. There's a great potential for this. There's a very important development, for example, in Kenya in this regard. We have also, as the Schiller Institute, people in our organization have made a huge commitment, which you'll learn about from Jacques Cheminade, the leader of the French movement of the International Larouche Organization, to Transaqua, which is a program of refilling Lake Chad. Lake Chad is this gigantic lake, which is basically in the middle of Africa, and it is. I think it has. There are about 120 million people who live right in that area. This lake is down to 10% of where it had been in the past. It needs to be refilled, and that means a huge water transfer project, bringing water in from basically from the south up there. Big infrastructure policy. And so we have been promoting that, attending major conferences in Africa to discuss this. And the main opponents of this kind of policy are people who are overtly Malthusian, who say we can't do this because of the climate, because of the effect on wildlife, all types of silly stuff like that.
Do you need to take a break? I heard your
Yeah.
bell go off.
I'll be 1 minute. I'll be right back. Thank you.
You got it, buddy. Well, Africa is a great example of where, I mean, compare the idea that we can fly a helicopter on Mars to the idea that African people can't even count on fresh water in the morning. They have to go and pump it and carry it home in buckets. Why is that? Why are those two things happening in the same universe? Why is it that we can spend billions of dollars on ideas that seem wonderful? I mean, I'm all for going to Mars. I want to go to Jupiter. I want to go, to, be like Captain Kirk and fly around and meet new civilizations and do all kinds of fun stuff. But I don't want to do it at the expense of having children have to go dig up lithium in horrific mining conditions so that I can have a cell phone. I don't like that. Let's bring Daniel back.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Sure. As I was just saying, the contrast between a NASA mission to Mars to fly a helicopter on Mars just to show that we can do it, and the poverty of people around the world, but we were specifically talking about Africa and people that are, they can't even wake up in the morning to a glass of water. They have to go out and find it somewhere, pump it, carry it home. Those two scenarios are existing at the same time in this world, in people's mind, and that people somehow seem to be able to live with that cognitive dissonance. That I think is where the irony is just unbelievable to me. If you're willing to state it, if you're willing to face the fact that if we weren't distracting ourselves with what seemed like glorious, wonderful scientific projects, we could have spent a tenth of that money to improve the lives of millions and millions of people in a place like Africa, but we chose not to. What's your view on that?
Well, I would say my view is that the choice is between, for example, the monetary policy of the past several years and the economic development. I think I would urge to consider that as the duality here, because we printed $14 trillion between 2020 and 2021. That's between, 14 trillion. That's between the Fed, the European Central Bank, and the US Treasury. 14 trillion. So, I mean, if you look at like money supply in 1 year, it went up by 40%. Completely insane. So, was any of that invested in economic development, in real economic development in the United States or otherwise? No. I mean, to have a crash program for thermonuclear fusion energy, you're not talking about $14 trillion. You're talking about like $10 billion a year. To figure out how to industrialize and develop Africa, how to contribute the credit that is required for that, or just to feed people on this planet, just to get the emergency food supplies to people who need it, and then to initiate the development of many, many, many new family farms, shutting down these agricultural cartels that are causing famine, and this free trade orientation that is causing the famine. Those steps, honestly, they don't take money. I mean, the really striking thing about Larouche's economic thought and the success of it is that development corridors, in other words, the building of real physical infrastructure that changes the whole space-time, the whole characteristics of the economic conditions, that is how you create wealth. It doesn't cost money, it creates wealth. In the same sense that the Chinese say, if you want to become rich, then build a road. And that orientation is something that it's somewhat spiritual, right? Because actually that's what Douglas MacArthur said. He said that we need a spiritual recrudescence if we're going to prevent World War III, a sort of a reopening of the wounds of the soul, and a willingness to be vulnerable and recognize what we've done to humanity, what has been allowed, in other words, to be done to humanity. But because the orientation is very straightforward, it's what you said already. Africa is the world of potential. It's the place with the greatest potential, as opposed to the way that the city of London looks at Africa, or wants to propagandize for people to think about Africa, which is to say, well, Africa's poor. They need resources. They suffer because they are poor. They don't have potential because they are poor. That's completely fraudulent, because it begins from the idea that the human mind of the child in Africa is worthless, that the child in Africa has no soul that is worth saving, that has no existence other than as some kind of a blip on the screen. It's quite unfortunate that they're going to die in mass numbers, but that's how it is. That's how the world is. That's what the British mindset, this mindset of the British oligarchy, of someone like Lord Bertrand Russell, is. That's what the mindset is of someone like Tony Blinken at the State Department in the United States. So we're not going to accept that. Humanity is not going along with that anymore. At the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting, the 20th anniversary meeting that just happened on the 16th and 17th of September, there was a commitment to the economic development of Afghanistan. And everyone agreed that's what's best for everyone. It's what's good for Afghanistan. It's what's good for their neighbors in the region. It's what's good for humanity. So we're going to do it because it's good. And that kind of orientation is growing in the world, because that's what has made China powerful, is the fact that they're doing that kind of thing. And I think that's where we can put you can have faith in that process, and then recognize that kind of shift, we could bring it about and both have major scientific projects into outer space and have a mission to develop the irrigation systems that are necessary for the continent of Africa.
And you all are actively advocating for that, and for basically the same thing that President Kennedy talked about in his inauguration speech in 1961. When we talk about the economy and the $14 trillion you just spoke of, which is just horrific, I'm sure that the Larouche, being an economist, would be horrified by that if he were to hear that number. What is you all's reaction to that, and how are we going to proceed to manage this disaster?
So I do want to, give you a certain sense of what Helga has been saying, because I think she's just a tremendous source of guidance and leadership in this moment. And her view is that it is on account of this blowout of the system, which is onrushing, and this is what LaRouche, of course, forecast as well, that we're faced with this extreme danger of thermonuclear war. Um, she's been focused on the response of certain Russian leaders to the crisis. For example, you can read, and I strongly recommend it, this statement from the Izborsk Club, which is a club that Sergei Glaziev, the Russian economist, is a part of, in which they really say what they think is going on. If I mean, I have a brief quote from it. Um, they say, "A great war is on the doorstep. The violent confrontation between Russia and the West poses the ultimate question. Will Russia survive in the struggle, or will it finally and irreversibly disappear? A great war is on the doorstep. The battlefields of Donetsk and Lugansk, extending to Odessa and Kharkov, to Warsaw and London, to New York and Tokyo, encompass the entire planet, its terrestrial and cosmic spaces." And it goes on further. All this power is aimed at Russia, seeks to destroy it, to destroy not even the Russian government, nor our army and defense industry, not the culture of Rublev and Pushkin, but the very phenomenon of Russia, the very phenomenon of the Russian people. So I read from that, not necessarily to endorse the statement. I may not put it the same way that he does, but you have to understand, or that they do rather, how the Russian leadership is looking at the situation. They consider what is going on to be absolutely fundamentally existential in a way that cannot be exaggerated. If you hear what what they stated right there, um, and they are extremely concerned and preparing for a escalation of warfare, which we're seeing parts of that, like the news about the sabotage of the Nord Stream pipelines that came today. There, things are happening and unfolding that demonstrate that these concerns have basis in fact, and the fact that you have NATO and other forces saying we have to prepare for general nuclear war. That's the actual situation that we're in right now. Our strong view is that the analysis of LaRouche is that this was going to happen. He predicted it would happen because of the failure of the axioms of the Western free trade economists, monetarist economists. And so, in a certain sense, what we're saying is the only way that this is going to go is that we're going into hyperinflation and World War III unless certain crucial policies are taken to reorganize the worthless debt of the financial system, meaning cancel the worthless debt with the Glass-Steagall restoration, as Franklin Roosevelt did in 1933, and to initiate Hamiltonian national banking, to nationalize the Federal Reserve, and to begin organizing state credit immediately to go to the mega projects that are needed in the United States, but to do this on a global scale. The U.S. president has got to sit down with with the Chinese president, with the Russian president, and others, especially with the Chinese at this point, and discuss the basis for a new monetary system, because they're going to have to admit once and for all that this thing is rotten, completely bankrupt. There's no future here at all. And if they don't admit that, and they think they can go along with it, if we don't cause an intervention that would change that commitment that they have presently, the leaders of Western economic policy, then I think it's very likely that we will just go into a dark age.
I I haven't said the word racism yet in this show, but when we talk about Malthusianism, I think it goes right along with the ideas that were propagated by British, I would even go back and say it was a psychological warfare technique of the Malthusians to try to put out all these crazy theories uh, there's different qualities of mankind that the Helena Blavatsky's stuff and all the mystical esoteric stuff that's attractive to people that haven't got a compass as to how life, where are we going, where are we coming from, where are we going, uh, tossing out the ideas that seem to have filtered into people's self-consciousness over centuries. And that is that some people are not worth as much as other people, and that you can tell something by the color of somebody's skin as to whether or not they're going to be a fully human person. And without that sense of racism, I think they wouldn't be able to get away with their Malthusian economics. What do you think?
I think you're right on. I mean, the idea that there's anything other than one human race is a crime. It's like you said, it's just brainwashing to accomplish that goal.
All right. Well, let's make sure everyone is aware of the conference once again on October 15th. And let's see if I've got a graphic I can share about that. Here it is. Just a second. And we'll get that up on the screen. And thank you again for a very lively conversation. And my instinct here is correct. That I really needed to get you on the show to talk about people, to talk to people about, you know, what is the LaRouche movement really about? And I think we've got a pretty good understanding right now of what it is and why we need to support Helga and the Schiller Institute in this conference on October 15th. So let me get that up on the screen. And and there you go. Last word from you, Daniel Burke, before we go off in our different directions, continuing our work.
Well, I really want to thank you first of all, and thank your audience for listening and participating in this, and invite everyone to come. And I want to stress something which we can develop another time. I can tell you more about the fact that this is an international youth conference. Everyone is invited. Everyone, no matter your age, should participate online or in person. But I want people to know there will be young speakers like Jackson Hinkle, who's only 23 years old. We'll have Haz Aldin, who's 26. And these guys are not the only people. We'll have a bunch of other people who have begun working with the LaRouche movement as a LaRouche youth movement who are in their early 20s. And I think that just seeing what young people are doing, student age people are doing in the United States and across the world, because we will have people participating from Yemen, from South Africa, as I said, from Ibero-America, perhaps from Mexico and Bolivia, Colombia. We'll have messages from Bangladesh, messages from India. We'll have a wide variety of people who will make their voices known at this event. But it should inspire people to see that there are youth prepared to commit to building a new paradigm and defeating green fascism.
Excellent. Well, folks, if you know some young people that are interested in moving the ball forward towards peace and equality and all of the good things that we all want for our young folks, then let them know. Encourage people to participate. And once again, Daniel Burke, it's been a pleasure this morning. Thanks for being with me. Thanks to everyone in the chat room. And I will see you guys tomorrow with Mark Kulak.
Thank you very much.